So where are we at? Why are we talking about this? If you look at the statistics, the usage of cash, which is government issued money, has been steadily declining over the last decade. From 2014 to 2019, which is the most recently published data from Payments Canada, the usage of cash went down by another 38%. That is roughly the equivalent of going from mid-30s to under 20%. Now you may ask, why worry about this? Why should we care? If you look at the Canadian Bankers Association, they say 99% of Canadians have access to a bank account, so therefore they will in principle have access to electronic payments. So not a concern here, right? Cash is also dirty, as we know from COVID. You really want to spray it with some Lysol before you use it. Cash is risky for businesses because when you have big amounts of cash, you have to bring them to the bank. That alone is a risky process. If you have cash at home, it could be stolen from you. Your wallet can be stolen. That risk is much lower when you have a payment card, or even when you have a cell phone where you really need a fingerprint or a face scan in order to use it. If you want to have cash, and after all, it's also inconvenient because you have to walk and get money from your ATM usually, because most employers pay you with either a check, which you have to deposit in a bank, or by electronic fund transfer. So why should we worry about this? Well, the first thing you can say is that 20% of transactions are still happening in cash, even though people have access to it. So clearly they seem to want to use it. Also, if you look at the data a little more carefully, the Canadian Bankers Association says very proudly that 70% of Canadians pay off their credit cards, for instance, every single month. So the high rates that come with credit cards are not a concern. Well, the flip side of that is that 30% of people have a balance, and that's expensive. And in fact, every time they spend an extra dollar, that costs them money. That costs them real money. So that for 30% of Canadians, that already is a problem, and using digital payments means it's not easy. Cash is anonymous. You can make your transaction. Neither the merchant knows anything about you, nor can anybody track what you do. That has its value by itself. Privacy is a common good, and we have rights to privacy. Cash helps you curb your spending. You can only spend what is in your wallet. So if you have a budget for small payments, for instance, for your coffees, if you spend your coffee money, it's gone. So that's convenient. If you think about it, once you have to hand over cash, you have to break a $10 bill for your $4 coffee, when there's such a thing still existed, that hurts probably a lot more than when you just take your debit card or credit card and just do a little tap. There's actually research on that. It avoids you avoid fees, but also in particular helps you to help the merchant who has to pay a substantial fee often for your card, anywhere from 1.5% to 3%, depending on which card you use. And if the merchant doesn't have to pay that fee, well, ultimately the fee is not paid by the merchant, but it's paid by you, the consumer. There are people who live in remote communities. They don't have access to merchant terminals where they can make their electronic payments. They like their payments in cash. It's the most convenient way to get money around. Overall, the simple fact is cash is universally acceptable and available and usable by anybody. There's many reasons why people like cash. And in fact, more than 80% of Canadians say they have no intention of abandoning cash altogether. Put it differently, Canadians have a preference for cash. Now there's change on the horizon. If you think about it, there are already thousands of Internet of Things items that are sold every day. Look at your own house. People have Alexas, coffee machines connected to the internet, washing machines, fridges, microwaves, their Roomba, their watches, their devices, the various ones that they have. All of these items collect data about you, and in one form or another in the future, all of these devices will have some payment feature in it. Number one, for many Internet of Things items that want to do micropayments under a penny, that's quite difficult to accomplish with the current payment system, where each transaction already involves a fixed fee of some form in many cases. More importantly, if you are a user of those 30% that don't want to pay off that credit card, it gets very difficult for you to participate in the digital economy without using a credit or debit card, without actually having to go through your bank and incurring further fees. And now finally, of course, these items, these Internet of Things items, and any of the other devices that you have, what they do is they track you and they track your data. Now, the purpose of that, of course, is to provide you with better advertisements of some form, which is a double-edged sword. Getting more relevant advertisements for you is useful on the one hand, because you don't have to see nonsense, but in other cases there's all kinds of room for manipulation. Most importantly though, if you are the data, you should have some sovereignty over your data, and as it is, you don't. Knowing in top of your surf history and where you're going, actually how you spent your money and what you spent on it, you can only imagine how extremely valuable that would be for advertisers. Now that brings me to the next thing. There is already new money and new payment mechanisms on the horizon. We have such a thing called stablecoins. These are blockchain tokens that are equivalent of Canadian dollars or US dollars that are already available. And you can already use them for some forms of payment. The Chinese government is issuing a digital currency, which would be extremely valuable for people who come to Canada and who are used to using it. This can become easily one of the currencies for small payments that you make in certain stores. And if you may start using this first out of convenience and eventually out of need. And of course, there's the big player here, which is called DM. You may have heard about 2 years ago that Facebook made a major announcement about issuing its own financial or developing its own financial infrastructure under the name Libra at the time. Libra is now DM. So that too is something which people will be using, and as they may first use it for convenience to get access to particular services, but eventually it may become a necessity. So it is important to think ahead of these items. In our opinion, there's a very strong case to give Canadians the means to participate in the digital economy with cash-like privacy, and also without having to go through a commercial entity. Right? So that you can make payments without having a separate set of commercial interests to worry about.